Hi, good morning. Here with Andrew Birch from Binary on the Business Spotlight today. How you doing, Andrew?
Very well, thanks, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, really well too. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So, as always, if you could give us a little bit of background as to who you are, what it is you do, how long you've been doing it for, please, Andrew.
So I'm Andrew Birch, co-founder and CEO of Binary, and we're a Microsoft Dynamics 365 partner, specializing in one of those Dynamics products, which is their Tier 1 ERP system, finance, operations, and commerce, which we deliver primarily into the food ingredients, and agri sector.
Fantastic. So, when did you start the business and how did you get into that?
So it all started really. It was back in 2003. I was doing a bit of freelance sort of work with agencies in sort of consulting and IT strategy, more around hardware and networking than anything else. And I went up to see a business in Massam in North Yorkshire, and it sort of said 1 week consultancy, and I was thinking, what businesses are up there? Breweries, Deakston's, Black Sheep.
Yeah.
Nope, there's also an animal feed manufacturer up there
Yeah.
called Ianson Brothers, and I went and did some work for them, helping them develop a whole new IT strategy, which included buying a replacement ERP system. Went through that selection process with them and helped them select a product which was then called Microsoft Business Solutions Exapta. And after the initial project went in, they asked me if I'd stay on as IT manager, which I did. So from 2004 to 2008, was working with them as IT manager up in Massam, and in 2009 struck out on my own, left there with their blessing to start Binary, a very small startup with just three other friends back then, aimed at doing a bit of everything in the technology world, but contracting and working in the Dynamics space, the Microsoft Business Solutions space, as well as various other bits and bobs, from Russian skincare creams to online gaming in Malta. But what really stuck was the whole sort of the ERP side of things in the sector that I'd originally started in up at Ianson Brothers. And yeah, that sort of brought us to where we are today. I wouldn't say it was a strategically planned move, but within a couple of years of starting, we knew where our revenue was coming from, and we knew what to
Right.
focus.
So, what was the kind of impetus for starting? What was you just thought, I've got a job, I want to go
Yeah,
along.
I think what had happened was I was actually encouraged by the then FD, who I reported to, my line manager at Ianson, who had sort of noted that I'd obviously gone as far as I could with the system sort of internally and within their internal systems, and was basically sort of encouraging me to strike out and do it for some other companies and do it for myself. So he sort of, it was his encouragement and sort of pushing to go out and start providing the same system to similar type companies, and really sort of stretch the boundaries of what I was doing, because whilst there was still more work to do there, he said, it's relatively limited within the confines of one business. What you've learned about the software, what you bring to that, I think you should bring to more people. So I was sort of pushed, if you like, and then sort of later in Binary's evolution, just as he was starting to go towards retirement, he actually we had him as our part-time FD for a day a week, which was a really lovely transition. We had him for a couple of years, helping us during one of our growth periods. So
Right.
that was a sort of a nice completion of the story. And Iansons remain one of our most important and closest clients to this date.
Brilliant. It's a good story, that, and great sort of leadership shown there in terms of people management, I guess. Maybe you call it pushed.
Yes.
Motivating, but yeah, depending on
Well,
how you
I
view
think it
it.
was bittersweet, because obviously once they lost me, they had to replace me, and that was a challenge for them. But I'm forever grateful to him, and I suppose the other Ironsons is a family business. They're fourth generation at the time, and I worked directly for a couple of the family members. And again, most of what I sort of have as my background in business and the foundations of my company here were lessons learned from there. And obviously, we trade heavily in that industry now, and it's a very small industry, very close knit. Everyone does know everyone, and I'm forever thankful for my roots back at Ironsons. It's played a huge part in allowing us to get the foothold in the agri sector that we have.
Fantastic. So, what makes you guys stand out then? What is it, sort of
Oh,
values or?
Various things. I give you some of the people who have to sit through my demonstrations or software pitches might say it might be my ability to talk non-stop and relentlessly. I was accused of being a Duracell bunny in the most recent pitch, and that was when I joined at 6 a.m. from the States. But I suppose I came up through that in the agri space particularly. I came up as IT manager in a feed mill. I understood the pressures of the business. I understood the 24/7 nature. I'd done the 3 a.m. call outs. I knew how the business actually worked as being an employee in it. And obviously that's the sector we started selling into and still sell into heavily. And I suppose my industry knowledge shines through, I suppose initially. Now, I'd say that's no longer unique to me. And there are people who've joined the business with no experience of the agri sector and animal feed who are equally well received at our customers. And I suppose what that really comes down to now is we're a small independent business who care and are customer and solution focused. And that's not to say our competitors aren't, but the Microsoft Dynamics space, particularly for the product that we sell, has undergone a lot of change in the last 15 years. A lot of the smaller partners like ourselves, we're 22 people. People like ourselves have been bought up by the likes of KPMG, EY, PwC, not sort of mid-sized IT companies. It's gone straight to the enterprise sector. And so there's now a huge gap between personal, owner-managed independent partner and the half dozen solution integrators around the world that are the Microsoft global partners for this product. And I suppose there is a world of difference between our extremely personal connection to a project and the likes of if you pick up the phone to KPMG and get sent a team, and that contrast increases not through our actions, but through the changes in our industry each and every year. The more people get acquired by larger and larger businesses, the bigger that gap between the personal and the corporate. Yeah. And a lot of our customers in that food and agri sector, if you think we start to cross over at farming, then grain trading, then dairy processing and food manufacturing, flour milling, we've still got a lot of family-owned businesses in there. It's probably time for one of our key statistics, but between our customer base, unless you're a gluten-free vegan, you can't really go through a day in the UK or Ireland without eating something or multiple things that will have had ingredients or products that'll have been made through our software. So even though we've got a relatively small client base and we're a relatively small company, the parts of the supply chain we're woven into are pretty key to everyone's existence.
I like that stat. Thank you very much for that. That's good. And yeah, a real nice reflection on kind of what makes you unique in the sector that you're working in. So the business journey then, Andrew, what's that been like since you've started? Some people saw roller coaster or exciting. Is there a word that you describe to use it and then expand?
Relentless.
Relentless. Okay.
Relentless. Yeah. I think it's. I am for the amount I travel. It makes logical sense that I'm A, single, and B, have no children because I would otherwise be divorced and estranged. Yeah, I think it's the similar thing to people say, oh, you don't know what it's like to have kids until you have them. I think it's the same story with running a business. You absolutely, no one can tell you what it's actually going to be like. Running it, being responsible for it, hiring staff. We effectively self-funded, so we didn't have any startup capital or investors, and all of the growth has come out of earnings. And we've never had any outside investment, and that's a different dimension. We didn't go out there for a funding series and got a couple of million quid and then spent it on some staff and infrastructure. We've had to sort of build everything as we've gone, which definitely makes you view value. The value of things, the value of people, the value of the resources you've got in the business and what you're able to do far more. But yes, I think possibly like a family, it is a constant source of thought, concern, worry, and even the size we are now, where we've got a strong management team, and myself and Josh are really back from from the front line of day-to-day operational management, it doesn't go away. It's something you've created, and yeah, I think relentless is probably the best word. Even when in times of plenty, when there's plenty of work on the books and plenty of work on the horizon, then you've got to do that work. And then when there's no work on the horizon, then you've got to worry about bringing it in. So it doesn't matter where you're at. There's always and then if you get too much work, you need to hire more staff, and then you've got to train them. So, but yeah, the journey, it's taken us to some fantastic places. We work primarily in the UK, Ireland, and the US, and we actually have a legal entity in all three of those jurisdictions. So even though we're a small entity, we have all the complexity of a global business in that regard. And we've traveled around the world. I mean, whilst we focus on food, feed, and agriculture, we've also worked for some sort of household names like TUI Travel, specifically with their specialist holidays and ski division, Crystal Ski, and their yachting division, Sunsail, and the Moorings, which took us out to deploying the entire team across Miami, the British Virgin Islands, working on a yacht base for 6 weeks over Easter, implementing warehousing systems for spare parts, because who knew that crude yachts required so many teaspoons and tea towels? So truly, if you'd asked me leaving in 2009 from an animal feed mill, would I be in the British Virgin Isles for 6 weeks living on a yacht implementing a warehousing system? No, but it's taken us all over the world. We've met some wonderful people. We've made some lifelong connections. And in reality, I wouldn't change anything.
Well, it's a massive growth opportunity for you personally, with all those challenges and obstacles that come up with a growing business. But in terms of how you respond to those, that gives you the opportunity to, I suppose, flourish, as well, and learn a few things along the way.
Yeah, and I think actually the work in the Virgin Isles was actually a really interesting one, because it came along at a time where we were actually we had a bit of a slump in the order book, and we'd taken on some work for TUI. We didn't think it'd be that much, but it certainly occupied me, and we were only a team of 4 at the time, and it occupied all of my time. And I'm the sort of was the front end consultant, whilst the other guys in the company were mainly software developers. And we had another prospect come along just down the road in Leeds, a company we talked to 2 or 3 times, hadn't come to the right resolution with their current partner, wanted to start again, and were very keen to give us all the work. And they said, "Oh, but we need you to start in January, and we want you." And I said, "Well, I'm kind of tied up until March, but Josh, who lives just around the corner from you, could start, and I could come on board in April." And I was like, "No, it would really need to be you." And it was one of those moments, and it happens a lot in our industry, where there's a lot of over-promising during the pre-sales pitch, and then there's a lot of using project management and I would say sometimes very flimsy excuses as to shift out deadlines or shift customers' expectations. And it felt like one of those moments where if we just agreed and banked the work, and then in January I'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is overrun and that's overrun," and end up pushing it out and putting Josh in there anyway, and moving things around. It felt like one of those opportunities where if we just sort of stretched the truth and said we could do it, and then we could have probably kept it spinning for 3 months and we'd have filled the order book. Mm-hmm. But it didn't feel right. It wasn't the values I'd been brought up on. It wasn't the values I'd learned at Ironsons. And we wanted to be different from the larger partners out there. The reason I didn't just take a job at one of the larger partners was to do things differently and honestly. And if something wasn't possible, say it wasn't possible. And so I turned it down and said, "I'm really sorry, we can't do it. We can start in April, but we can't start in January." They said, "Well, fine, fair enough." They went off to another company that promised they could get it done. And that the next day, me thinking, "Oh dear, I'm a pretty terrible businessman. I've got nothing in the order book now for the other 3 guys." TUI rang back and said, "We've reassessed the project, and it turns out there's actually a lot more work to do. So can we hire your entire team for 5 months, please?" So literally every single person was sold. We were deployed across the planet in warm, sunny places. And then we subsequently picked up the client in Leeds 2.5 years, 3 years later, when they were still struggling to get it done with the other partner. So I suppose that was a real big lesson in telling the truth and sticking to it, yes, even when it doesn't seem like the most commercially savvy move. And there's definitely been some times now we've got a management team here where I can see an eye roll at the board meeting going, "This is the ethics and the morals getting in the way again. We really should make this sale." And it's actually, no, I think the biggest thing that differentiates us now is that we are a small, focused team that tell the truth. And sometimes that's not what people want to hear,
Yeah.
But it is always the truth. If we think it's going to take longer, we'll tell you it takes longer up front. We won't pretend it'll take half the time to win the business. I'd love to say that was an easy
Hmm.
principle to stick to, and it just sounds obvious. But each and every time you look at it and you look at the pipeline and you think we need to bring in revenue and we need to keep this ever-growing team fueled with work, you have to sort of remind yourself of the founding values of the business and stick to it. And I'm very lucky to have a management team that really is behind that. To the point where their last meeting just before Christmas was spent turning around to a couple of customers who we'd just won contracts for, which was absolutely brilliant, and saying, I'm sorry, based on some recent factors and some health issues some of the team have had, we need to take an easier run at 2025, and we're pushing you out from July to August, or to October, sorry, and actually creating some room and some breathing room in the team. And we could wait till we get 3 months in and then deliver the news. But if we know now, we should tell the truth now, and we should front up to it. And I think that's our philosophy now, and I think we're
Yeah.
sticking to it.
Is that your biggest lesson then, do you think, today? Asking you the biggest lesson question about
Yeah,
scaling.
I would actually say it's sticking to that founding principle of honesty and integrity. It might not be popular. You will lose some sales. People will say, well, your competitor says they can do it in half the time. Even if you know in your heart it can't be done in half the time, if you've given a realistic quote and a realistic timescale, there is no merit to sacrificing your principles and integrity, lying to win the business, or even twisting the truth to win the business. It will only come back to bite you, and it will create pressures on you as a business owner, but also your team. If we oversell, if we overcommit, who's carrying that can? We're a professional
Yeah.
services business. It's our service delivery team, and you know at the end of the day, we're selling accountancy software. We're not running a hospital here. It's not life or death. And if people have to wait an extra 3 months for some accountancy software for the well-being of all involved, then that's actually what matters.
Yeah. Love that. You've shared some really good stuff. There's lots of things in my head, but I think you've summarized it really well in terms of that values-driven approach and a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain rather than short-term gain for long-term pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think probably the tag on is and it ties to the same thing, is you'll never actually catch up. I think that's probably one of the things in business. You always, oh, we're late on it. Right, well, we'll get caught up next week. We'll work a couple of evenings. I'll work the weekend. The reality is you never really catch. You might catch up on a document or an email. You never really catch up on a missed workload. And I think, especially for professional services companies, we need to think about that sort of capacity of our teams and of our people, and we need to plan with contingency, and you need to make your profitability calculations and forecasts based on that. You need to forecast an 80% utilization, not 100% utilization, and you need to factor those breaks in for when the unexpected happens. And I think you probably now we've done it enough. This has been 15 years now, or we're coming to the 16th year. I can definitely say, looking back, we've never caught up. So let's not try and plan to in future. So when someone says, "Oh, we'll get caught up in," it's a collective silence now. It's like, no, we
yeah,
won't. Let's replan properly.
good.
So two
Some
things
good
linked together.
shares. Some good shares in there as well, Andrew. Some valuable advice. Is there any advice, if you could go back in time to meet yourself again, starting the business, that you would give, knowing what you know now?
Oh, so much. What to summarize it to you though?
Say one
Pl-
piece that
pl-
comes to mind.
yeah, probably planning. I think you can convince yourself when you're a small business that it's all about doing, and it's not so much about planning. I think now, sitting down and as we start to plan out our years and our future forecasts and do 3-year forecasts, looking at the sense of that, how it helps us shape our sales, our marketing, and all of our hiring, all of our activities. Um, we convinced ourselves when we just started it was all about just bringing in some work and then doing it, and there was no real need for planning. Had we developed better planning habits, even if back then it had simply been a spreadsheet at a monthly level or some basic form of forecasting and administrative discipline,
Mhm.
it's so hard to add in later. And I think that's a double lesson, because what we implement for customers is an ERP system. So that's a transformative sort of accounting, stock management, manufacturing management solution that runs across people's businesses, and our clients are sort of about a minimum £50 million turnover, anywhere up to a couple of billion. And we take them through that change process of having to systemize and implement all of these processes and planning systems. And that's 2 years and sometimes millions of pounds of pain for them. And the challenges are no real different for us with 22 people now and transforming our team and trying to implement those systems. And actually, if I wind my way all the way back to when we originally started, if we just set ourselves up some simple processes, procedures, spreadsheets, and actually stopped going hand to mouth and thinking about each day's revenue and each day's sales, and actually had a little bit of a plan and embedded that in our culture, I think the last 15 years would have been less relentless. I think
That's a
it
great
would have
story.
been smoother. There'd have still been all the challenges, but I think we'd have had a better idea about where we were heading, even if the business and the direction changed with different contracts and different things. I think having no framework to drop that into as a sort of a plan and see how we were doing against it, that's probably the biggest piece of advice I would give to anyone starting a company. And that doesn't mean like a detailed daily business plan, but it does mean, whatever your capacity happens to be, whether it's people or machinery or manufacturing or cash flow for stock, having that outline plan and you kind of revising it and sticking to it and having those basic systems in place long before you think you need them. And I don't just mean software, I do just mean processes and a plan. I think that's probably it, because I think at least 50% of my stress has come from reacting to the change and then working out how to deal with it rather than having a framework to drop it into.
Brilliant. That's a great share. I mean, speaking to business owners as we do at excuse me, at Action Coach, and a lot of the time, just people sometimes don't see the need for planning, but it's building those early habits, because down the line they're going to come in useful for you. As you say, even no matter how simple or how small it feels at the start, like what's the point in this? But
That's
that habit, isn't it?
It is, and I think I read quite a few books on like business planning and the different tools, and I think I was kind of put off by the level of detail.
Yeah.
And then I realised what we needed at one level was just a very simple weekly resource plan of 6 resources down the left hand side, all the weeks of the year across the top, and just basically color coding them. That's client A, that's client B, that's when we're on holiday. And before you knew it, we could start to identify the need for another consultant. But as we are now, we can easily budget for a new consultant or a new developer and see how that fits in, and we know where our revenues need to adjust. But back then, we were constantly, do we have enough work, don't we? Do you know what? A simple spreadsheet showed us whether we had enough work or not,
Yeah.
and where they would fit. And the lesson would be, don't get tied up in reading too many blogs, articles, podcasts about the types of planning or tools or software. You know what you're doing in your business, you know what your aim is, you kind of have a feel for what your key either requirements or resource constraints are, and work around some form of planning at that level. Once it gets more advanced, once you get bigger, yes, you can start to use some of the established and more standardized systems or practices. But just at the beginning, you kind of know where you're heading, and just put that time aside to keep a track of what you're actually doing, rather than just our worst one, probably my biggest failure, and I didn't ask this one, it was billing. We were so busy out consulting and working with the clients that it would get to the end of the month where we should pull together our billing, and I'd be busy and I'd be out on site. I'd be the one who'd do the billing. I'd go from one client to the next and I wouldn't get our invoicing out. And we had enough money in the bank, so I wasn't that worried about it. And then another month would go by, and then another month would go by. And eventually we would get our customers emailing us going, for the love of God, it's been 9 months. Can you send us a bill? We must owe you about 300K.
Yeah.
That was okay when we were really small, because we got to a point whereby our revenue that was coming in across the team of 4 was very high for those 4 people, against what our costs were, which was one small office in Station Bridge in Harrogate. And so we did have the cash flow. But then, of course, as we've grown the business and we've hired those people, we've added those consultants, suddenly cash flow becomes an issue. And it would be much better if we didn't bill customers annually. That was interestingly something, because as we appointed a management team, we appointed 4 new directors to sort of take day-to-day operational responsibility from Josh and I. The first thing they did on the first day they were empowered was take all billing away from me, and went, we're now going to start invoicing customers monthly. There's been a revolution. Cash flow has been forever altered.
Who'd have known?
The customers are simultaneously delighted in that
Yeah.
they know where their costs are, but not happy in that their cash flow has been dented by more regular billing. But yeah, and that was one of my hugest failures. And I put that against planning. You know, if I actually had sat down and worked out how each month needed to go, I'd have planned myself a day a month to do the billing and admin at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month. That's the solution. That was the solution. That is the solution. That's what we're doing now. Could have been the solution 15 years ago.
Great stuff. Another good share, a good story, and appreciate your kind of honesty in sharing these things.
Oh yeah.
Couple more things. Firstly, before we sort of wrap it up, what inspires you to do what you do, Andrew? What's the reason you
Um,
get out of bed each morning?
so we're a company of technologists, and I'm really grateful that my co-founders are also software developers and technologists. We're actually interested in the technology. We work in a very boring branch of technology. ERP is the most enterprise and corporate end of business software you could possibly get into, and it's often seen as a necessary evil. A lot of the companies are very modification averse. They don't want to, they want to implement standard as much as possible. But the product we work with from Microsoft, without making a sales pitch for it, was designed to be changed. It was built by software people, by technologists who understood that whilst you should standardize, you should also be able to customize and embed the software correctly in a business process. And what drives us, what inspires us, is very simply we like doing cool stuff with what is essentially very boring and very mundane software. So whilst every other partner on the planet said no to the modification, no to the integration, no, that's not possible, no, that won't be commercially viable, no, it'll be too expensive, no, it'll be too risky, we absolutely revel in turning around and going, yes, it's possible, yes, it'll work, and we'll develop it for a fixed price. So we immediately insulate the customer from the risk of the budget overrun and all the failure, and then we know we can deliver it. And our problem now, as our customers would say, is that we can't deliver enough as quickly as possible. There's 400 development requests in the backlog, many of which customers would be delighted to pay for. And we're still trying to scale our teams to deal with that demand. But every single one of them, when they look at their initial project, their initial go live, and we said what could be integrated, how things could work, did we deliver on that scope? I believe every single one of them would say, yes, you delivered on it and exceeded it. And that's what drives us. Customer satisfaction, which we would love to increase in terms of the ones who've got the 400 issues that they would love to get fixed, and we need to keep working on that. But when we sell a project and we say we'll deliver it, we say it'll work, we say it won't stop your company, we mean it. And every single one of our customers is referenceable to that. That's what inspires us and drives us to keep doing it. We have had enough offers on the business. There are people interested in acquiring us and taking us into those larger software houses. But we know right now that if we did that, the customers who put their faith in us and the employees who put their faith in us to deliver those projects, that would be lost. What we do, whilst it might be a significant statistic for us in that market, most of the people who buy us, we're not, a big enough footprint across the food and agri industry for them to warrant maintaining a whole division. And we know that those commitments and the way we deliver to those customers would change. And we're not ready for that yet. Yes, it would be lovely to retire and lovely to have to end the relentless march of the business's growth, but at the same time, the only reason the business has grown to the size it has is the commitment of our staff and the faith customers showed in spending very significant sums of money with us and putting their faith in what was originally a four-man team. And we'd like to honour that commitment and keep delivering to them.
Well, that's all part of the planning process down the line about your retirement and things like that, isn't it? We'll come
It is. I'm not planned that bit yet.
No, but there's a chance an opportunity to think about it in line with how you want to do it and your values and all those things that we've covered. Brilliant inspiration. I can see the eyes light up when I ask that question, which I always love doing, and it definitely comes through. So thanks again for sharing that. So then lastly, if people want to get in touch with you, Andrew, if Binary is someone that they're interested in knowing more about, how do we do that? In the case of sharing a website?
Yeah, so there is a web address to hit, and we are actually in the process of getting a brand new website done because the current one is awful. And we've been so lucky to have almost all of our business come to us as word of mouth referral, plus an advert in a publication called Feed Compounder, which is the kind of magazine you would get at the caption competition at the end of Have I Got News for You. It's the bi-monthly journal for the feed milling industry in the UK and Ireland.
Excellent.
But yeah, our website is www.binary.ax, Alpha X-ray, which used to be the name of the software we sold from Microsoft. So later renamed it from Dynamics AX to Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance, operations, commerce, and supply chain management, which is so much snappier. But yes, www.binary.ax has got some email addresses and a phone number. We have no salespeople, no pre-salespeople. It's myself and one of the other directors who do all of the new business work. And so we're quite proud to say anyone who has a conversation with us, people you're talking to are ultimately the people who are going to deliver the project at the end. If you decide to work with us. So yeah, if anyone's interested, especially if they're in the seed, food, or agri sector, but we do stuff outside of that as well, like skiing, holidays, and yachts. But yeah, we'd be more than happy to chat to anyone.
Great stuff. Thanks, Andrew. And they'll know that they'll get an honest, truthful outcome and answer.
And that it may take longer than they scheduled with the amount I talk. But yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we're just based here right in the centre. We've got a lovely place in Victoria Avenue, which we're really happy to have found a few years ago. And so, yeah, and a very good coffee bar in here. So, yeah, people are always welcome to stop by as well.
Thanks again. And I appreciate all that you've shared. And I wish you all the best for the future success of the business.
Thank you very much. It's been great to be here.